The courthouse is burning. Smoke pours through shattered windows. The smell of gunpowder hangs thick in the April air. Inside, dozens of black men huddle together, trapped. Their ammunition ran out hours ago. Outside, hundreds of white men surround the building, rifles loaded, faces twisted with rage. Some wear makeshift uniforms, others don't bother hiding their identities. A white handkerchief appears through the smoke, waving, surrendering. The shooting stops for exactly 12 seconds. Then it starts again, but this time, it's an execution. What you're about to hear isn't just forgotten history. This is the massacre that destroyed Reconstruction, the massacre that changed America forever. And everything you learned about it in school? That was a lie. April 13th, 1873, Easter Sunday. Colfax, Louisiana, a tiny town you've probably never heard of. But on this day, it became the site of the worst massacre of Black Americans during Reconstruction. Over 150 men, most of them surrendered, most of them executed in cold blood. But here's what they never told you. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't a riot like your textbooks claimed. This was a planned military operation designed to overthrow a legally elected government. And when it was over, the men who did it got away with it. Not just walked free, they were celebrated as heroes. This massacre didn't just kill people, it killed an idea. The idea that Black Americans could have political power, the idea that Reconstruction could actually work. What you're about to hear in the next 8 minutes will make you angry. It should, because this is the story they tried to erase. Let's rewind. To understand the massacre, you need to understand what was happening in the South after the Civil War. For the first time in American history, Black men could vote, could hold office, could serve on juries, could testify in court, could carry weapons to protect themselves. In Louisiana, Black voters were the majority, and they were using that power. William Ward, a formerly enslaved man, now a state senator, commanding respect in the same halls where men had debated whether he was property or human. Levi Allen, a Union Army veteran, Black, now serving as a local official in Grant Parish, Louisiana. These weren't just symbolic victories. This was real political power, real change. And white Southerners were terrified. See, the Civil War ended slavery, but it didn't end the belief system that created slavery. White supremacy didn't disappear when the Confederacy surrendered. It went underground, reorganized, got smarter. In Louisiana, that meant the White League, the Knights of the White Camellia. Different names for the same thing, white terrorist organizations determined to take back political control by any means necessary. They called it redemption, taking back the South from Black political power, from Negro rule. But here's the truth they won't tell you. There was no Negro rule. Black politicians weren't trying to dominate white people. They were trying to build schools, fix roads, get fair wages, basic dignity. That was too much. By 1873, white Southerners had developed a playbook. Challenge every election Black candidates won. Claim fraud. Form rival governments. Use violence to enforce your version of reality. It worked again and again. And in Colfax, Louisiana, they were about to take it to a whole new level. November 1872, Louisiana's gubernatorial election. 2 men claim victory, William Pitt Kellogg, Republican, supported by black voters, and John McHenry, Democrat, supported by white supremacists. Both men declare themselves governor. Both swear themselves in. Louisiana now has two governments claiming legitimacy. Sound familiar? It should. This is the playbook. In Grant Parish, the same thing happens at the local level. Two men claim to be sheriff. Two men claim to be judge. Both sides appoint officials. The Republican officials are mostly black. The Democratic officials are all white. For months, it's a standoff. Then, on March 25, 1873, everything changes. A group of armed black men, led by freedmen and Union Army veterans, occupy the Colfax courthouse. They're not attacking anyone. They're defending the Republican government's claim to legitimacy, protecting their elected officials. They fortify the building, dig trenches, prepare defensive positions. About 150 to 300 black men, sources vary, but most were farmers, workers, veterans, ordinary people defending extraordinary rights. Some are armed with rifles, others have shotguns or pistols. Many have little ammunition, but they have something more important: conviction. They believe the law is on their side. They believe the federal government will protect them. They're about to learn a horrifying truth. Word spreads fast. Negroes have taken the courthouse. In the white communities around Colfax, the response is immediate. Men grab weapons, ride towards town. The message is clear. This uprising must be crushed. Christopher Columbus Nash, that's his real name, former Confederate officer, now leading what he calls a militia, but what everyone knows is a white supremacist mob. Over the next 2 weeks, hundreds of white men gather. They come from neighboring parishes, from Mississippi. Some estimate 300 men. Others say it was closer to 400. They bring cannons, they bring rifles, they bring an army's worth of ammunition. This isn't a spontaneous mob. This is a military operation designed to overthrow a legally elected government. And the black defenders watch them gather, watch the numbers grow. They send messengers to New Orleans, begging for federal troops, begging for help. None comes. Inside the courthouse, tension rises. Some men want to leave. Others argue they have to stand their ground. If they give up now, everything is lost. Every gain since the war, every promise of freedom. They're about to learn a horrifying truth. April 13th, 1873. Easter Sunday. The attack begins before dawn. Christopher Nash's forces surround the courthouse before dawn. Rifles aimed, cannon positioned, no escape routes. At 9 a.m., they send a messenger with an ultimatum: surrender the courthouse, leave your weapons, go home. The black defenders refuse. They believe they're in the right. They believe the law protects them. That's their fatal mistake. The shooting starts around noon. The white militia fires into the courthouse. The black defenders fire back, but they're outgunned and outnumbered 3-1, maybe worse. For hours, it's a siege. Bullets slam into wooden walls. The defenders' ammunition runs low, then runs out. Around 3 p.m., Nash's forces bring up their cannon. They aim it at the courthouse. Imagine being inside. The walls are thin wood. You have no ammunition left. Hundreds of rifles pointed at you. A cannon about to fire. Someone sets the courthouse roof on fire. Smoke pours in. The choice becomes simple: burn alive or surrender. The white flag goes up. Men pour out of the burning building, hands raised, coughing, unarmed, surrendering. You're not ready for this part. The shooting doesn't stop. Nash's men open fire on the surrendering men, point blank, execution style. Men fall in the doorway, others try to run. They're hunted down in the streets, shot in the back. Some beg for mercy, some pray, some scream. It doesn't matter. One witness later described seeing a black man shot, then stabbed with bayonets until his entrails protruded. Another man was beaten to death with rifle butts. Others were lined up and shot like it was target practice. But here's where it gets even darker. The massacre doesn't end at the courthouse. As the sun sets on Easter Sunday, Nash's men hunt down survivors. Men who fled into the woods, men who hid in homes, men who tried to swim across the river. They captured dozens, maybe 50, maybe more. The exact number becomes impossible to track because of what happens next. They hold a trial, right there. No lawyers, no judges, just white men deciding which black men deserve to die. Some are shot immediately. Others are held until nightfall. Then, in the darkness, the real horror begins. Groups of prisoners are taken into the woods. You can hear the gunshots echoing across the countryside, one after another, execution after execution. By morning, bodies are scattered across Colfax, in the courthouse ruins, in the streets, in the woods, in the river. The official death toll? Between 150 and 280 black men. Some historians believe it's higher. Many bodies were thrown in the river or buried in unmarked graves. Families who came looking for loved ones found nothing. 3 white men died, 2 by accident, friendly fire. Let that sink in. Over 150 black men dead, most of them after surrendering. 3 white men dead by accident. This wasn't a battle. This was a massacre, a slaughter, a lynching on a mass scale. And here's what makes your blood boil. The white men who did it, they went home and celebrated. You'd think this story ends with justice, with arrests, with trials, with punishment. You'd be wrong. Federal authorities eventually arrest 97 white men involved in the massacre. 97 people charged with conspiracy to deprive citizens of their constitutional rights. Sounds promising, right? Only 9 go to trial. Of those 9, only 3 are convicted. Christopher Nash isn't one of them. The 3 convicted men appealed to the Supreme Court, and in 1876, in a case called United States v. Cruikshank, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, overturns their convictions. The reasoning? The 14th Amendment only protects citizens from state violations of rights, not from private individuals. Read that again. The Supreme Court ruled that the federal government couldn't prosecute white terrorists for murdering black citizens because the terrorists weren't government officials. This ruling didn't just free the Colfax killers. It gutted Reconstruction. It told every white supremacist in the South, you can terrorize black citizens, you can murder them, the federal government won't stop you. United States v. Cruikshank remained law for decades. It was cited to justify countless lynchings, countless massacres, countless acts of terror against black Americans. The Colfax Massacre didn't just kill 150 people. It killed the legal protection that made Reconstruction possible. But the betrayal doesn't end with the Supreme Court. What happens next is maybe the most insidious part of this story, the part that reaches into your childhood classroom and poisons what you learned about history. Within years of the massacre, white Southerners started rewriting the story. They called it the Colfax Riot. Not massacre, riot. As if both sides were equally responsible. As if surrendering men being executed is a riot. They claimed black defenders fired first, that they were the aggressors, that white men were just defending themselves, defending civilization, defending white women and children from imaginary threats. All lies. They built a monument right there in Colfax. You can still visit it today. Want to know what it says? On this site occurred the Colfax Riot, in which 3 white men and 150 Negroes were slain. This event on April 13, 1873, marked the end of carpetbag misrule in the South. Read that carefully. Carpetbag misrule. That's code for black political power. Code for democracy. The monument celebrates the massacre. It glorifies it. It frames the murder of 150 surrendering men as a heroic act of liberation. That monument stood until 2021, 148 years. For nearly a century and a half, Louisiana displayed a monument that celebrated mass murder. That's not just ignoring history, that's actively lying about it. That's propaganda carved in stone. But here's what really gets me. Most Americans have never heard of the Colfax Massacre. It's not in most textbooks. It's not taught in most schools. When it is mentioned, it's often minimized or described as a clash or conflict. This wasn't a clash. This was terrorism. This was genocide. This was white supremacy enforced through mass murder. And it worked. After Colfax, the violence accelerated. White League paramilitary forces launched attacks across Louisiana. In September 1874, they fought the Battle of Liberty Place in New Orleans, an attempted coup against the state government. They temporarily seized the city. In Mississippi, white supremacists launched the Mississippi Plan, systematic terrorism to prevent black voting. Massacres in Vicksburg, in Clinton, in Yazoo City. By 1876, white Democrats had redeemed most Southern states. That's what they called it, redemption, taking back white political control through violence, fraud, and terror. In 1877, Reconstruction officially ended. Federal troops withdrew from the South. The Compromise of 1877 traded away black civil rights for political power. What followed was Jim Crow, 80 years of legal apartheid, lynching as social control, disenfranchisement, segregation, terror. The Colfax Massacre was the blueprint. It proved that white Southerners could use mass violence to overthrow legal governments and face no consequences, that the federal government would abandon black citizens when the political will faded. Every lynching, every Jim Crow law, every act of racist terror that followed, they all trace back to Colfax, back to the moment when the Supreme Court said white supremacist violence was beyond federal reach. This wasn't ancient history. People who lived through Jim Crow are still alive today. Their children are your neighbors, your teachers, your coworkers. The trauma doesn't disappear because textbooks ignore it. But here's what they really don't want you to know. The Colfax Massacre wasn't just about racism. It was about power, economic power, political power, social power. After the Civil War, Black Louisianians were building wealth, starting businesses, buying land, educating their children, electing officials who would protect their interests. That's what terrified white Southerners. Not just that Black people were equal, but that they might become more powerful, more successful, that they might actually win in a fair system. White supremacy isn't just prejudice. It's an economic system, a political system, a way of organizing society that requires Black people to stay on the bottom. The Colfax Massacre was about enforcing that system, about reminding Black Americans that no matter what the law said, white supremacists held the real power, the power of violence, the power to kill with impunity. And here's the part that connects to today. That system never fully ended. The descendants of the men who committed the Colfax Massacre, many became judges, politicians, business leaders. They passed down wealth, connections, power. They built the structures of Louisiana society. The descendants of the victims, many never recovered, lost land, lost businesses, lost political power, traumatized for generations. You can't understand modern inequality without understanding massacres like Colfax, without understanding how violence was used to destroy Black wealth, Black political power, Black communities. This isn't about making white people feel guilty. This is about understanding how we got here, how racial inequality was built, how it was maintained, how it was protected by law and violence. You can't fix something you don't understand. You can't heal wounds you pretend don't exist. In 2021, 148 years after the massacre, Louisiana finally took down the monument that celebrated it. But removing a monument doesn't remove the history, doesn't heal the trauma, doesn't return the stolen lives, the stolen land, the stolen futures. The Colfax Massacre should be as famous as the Alamo, as well known as Gettysburg. It should be taught in every American history class. Instead, it's been buried, minimized, erased. Why? Because if Americans really understood Reconstruction, really understood how much Black political power existed and how violently it was destroyed, it would fundamentally change how we see American history. We couldn't pretend racism was just individual prejudice. We'd have to confront it as organized terror, as policy, as genocide. We couldn't pretend the South lost the Civil War, because in many ways, white supremacists won the peace. They lost the war but won Reconstruction, won Jim Crow, won the narrative. The Colfax Massacre is American history, not Black history, not Southern history, American history. It's the story of what happens when democracy threatens the wrong people's power, when equality threatens hierarchy, when justice threatens those who benefit from injustice. It's the story of what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget. 150 men walked out of a burning courthouse with their hands up. They were surrendering. They were slaughtered anyway. Their names? Most of them lost to history. Their bodies? Many never recovered. Their families? Terrorized into silence. But their story? Their story is still being told. Because here's what the men who committed the Colfax Massacre didn't understand. You can kill people, but you can't kill truth. Not forever. You can bury it for a century, carve lies in stone, Write it out of textbooks. Teach generations of children a sanitized fantasy. But the truth remains, waiting, demanding to be heard. The Colfax Massacre changed America. It destroyed Reconstruction. It enabled Jim Crow. It created a legal framework that protected white supremacist violence for decades. But it also revealed something important: how fragile progress is, how quickly it can be destroyed, how much vigilance freedom requires. Those men who defended the Colfax courthouse weren't radicals. They were farmers and workers and fathers who believed in the promise of America, who believed the law would protect them, who believed democracy meant something. They were wrong about the protection, but they weren't wrong to fight. Because every right you have today, someone fought for it, someone bled for it, someone died for it. The Colfax Massacre died defending the idea that black votes matter, that black lives matter, that democracy should be real. We owe them more than monuments. We owe them truth. This is the Colfax Massacre, the day Reconstruction died in blood. This is the story they tried to erase. Now you know. Now tell someone else.